Hi, I'm Derek Ashong, and you are now in the stream. Today, where does Western Sahara fit into the Arab Spring? And the Kurdish question in Turkey. Besides military intervention, how can Turkey end its battle with Kurdish separatists? Our digital producer, Ahmed Shahab Eldin, is here looking out for your live feedback. Also on the couch today is Zia Moral, a Turkish writer and PhD candidate at the University of Cambridge. Zia, you just came back from Nigeria in some of your research. Tell us a little bit about what you saw.
Well, what I saw was quite a sad story of how the elections in Nigeria have shifted the local governance in certain places, and it triggered an ethnically and sometimes religiously, but often grievant violence between ethnic groups.
And is this something that has been, we know that there's been conflict between these ethnic groups since, for years now. So what about the elections sparked this increase?
Well, the fact that now there's a Christian president, it plays into a lot of local level and macro level politics in Nigeria. The fact that in places such as Kaduna State, which did see a lower rate of violence recently, the fact that for the first time in 35 years now the governor is a Christian rather than a Muslim, it triggered this whole game, and it's been manipulated by local parties. This is not necessarily about whether or not it's Islam or Christianity tension in places like Kaduna, but it's more about who's ruling the local government, who's got access. So the local political parties such as CPC have been really powerful in mobilizing youth on the banner of Islam or Christianity, and in the process killing hundreds of people.
Well, this is a really fascinating story. We may have to have you come back and really focus with us on that someday. Thanks so much for being with us, though.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. We always want to know what stories matter to you, so follow us on Twitter and send us a tweet using the hashtag AJStream. We may be able to feature your suggestion in a future episode.
Well, I'm Aslı Tunç. I'm a professor of media at Istanbul Bilgi University, Istanbul, Turkey. I am on the stream.
Sahrawis in Moroccan-occupied Western Sahara have long called for greater economic and political rights. During this year's Arab Spring, many Sahrawis hoped the media would pick up on their protests, but that story remains largely untold. Some are even calling Western Sahara's fight the forgotten Facebook revolution. Take a look at this clip from a documentary called Silent Sahara Rising. It actually shows how Sahrawi activists are spreading the word online about their cause, sometimes at very great risk to themselves.
To spread information.
Pensamos que es muy importante para publicar a la gente en Europa para que vea lo que pasa aquí en Sahara Occidental, porque hay mucha gente que no sabe, que hay bloqueado informativo.
Films and news are put up on the net, but it is a dangerous work.
Aunque ese trabajo, lo que trabajamos ahora clandestino, tenemos mucho peligro aquí en territorios ocupados. A veces carcelan nuestros amigos del equipo mediático, miembros, ahora uno en tribunal militar de Seli.
This month marks the 20th anniversary of the UN-brokered ceasefire, which ended 16 years of fighting between Moroccan forces and the Polisario Front, the movement for Western Saharan independence. Now let's take a look back again at the map of Western Sahara to give some additional context. If you'll look at this, you'll see that the nation is in fact divided between control by Morocco and control by the Polisario. So the question is, has Morocco adequately acknowledged the concerns of the Sahrawis, and what changes need to be made? Joining us now via Skype is Kamal Fadel, Polisario Front representative to Australia. Welcome, Kamal, to the stream.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be with you.
It's a pleasure to have you. Now, let me ask you about the economic status of the Sahrawi people. They say that they are being economically marginalized. Is this the case, and how sustainable is the current status quo?
Well, we know very much that Western Sahara is very rich in natural resources. It has a long coast. Which is renowned for its fisheries. It has large deposits of phosphates. It has also iron ore, zinc, gold, uranium, and a great potential for oil and gas. However, unfortunately, the Sahrawis in the occupied areas and also in the refugee camps are not benefiting from these resources. We know for a fact that the Sahrawis feel as second citizens in their own country. Those who are in refugee camps live in dire conditions. And Morocco has encouraged settlers to move into Western Sahara, who have become the majority of the population there, and they get the jobs. They have large incentives to settle in the territory. In the meantime, the local population feel marginalized and live in poverty and in great difficulties.
And so in light of that, what is the scale of the protest movement against Moroccan occupation?
Well, the Sahrawis have been for many years undertaking peaceful resistance. And in more recent times, in 2005, a huge uprising took place in the territory, which was suppressed, and the people were oppressed. They are taken into prison. They are tortured, in some cases killed, but they have not given up. They are very courageous and determined to continue to seek their basic rights by peaceful means. And there are so many political prisoners in jail, in prisons, both in the occupied areas, but also in Morocco.
Kamal, if I can just interrupt you, what you were saying earlier about encouraging, people to move into Western Sahara from Morocco doesn't sound so dissimilar than perhaps what's happening in Israel and the West Bank with settlers moving there. But we have a tweet coming from Samia bin Sharqi. She says the Polisario has lost a lot of international legitimacy after being funded and supported by Gaddafi for almost 4 decades. So now with Gaddafi out of power, does this maybe seem as though Morocco might have an opportunity now to solve this?
Well, I think that we need to clarify a few things here. Sahrawis received humanitarian assistance when they were facing Morocco's invasion and Mauritanian invasion in the early 70s. Not only from Libya, but also from many other countries all over the world.
Right.
Yes, we had students studying in Libya, and we received humanitarian assistance, food and medical supplies in the early 70s. But in the early 80s, some opposition figures were living in Morocco, Libyan opposition figures. And King Hassan II approached Gaddafi that in order to stop providing humanitarian assistance to the Sahrawis, the King Hassan II will hand over those opponents to Libya. And they did. And Libya reduced or even stopped its assistance to the Sahrawis. In fact, Gaddafi signed a deal with Morocco in 1984, and they had excellent relationships. And we have never had, for example, an embassy in Libya, while we have diplomatic representations and embassies in over 20 countries worldwide, full-fledged embassies.
So come on.
So the support was not that great coming from Libya. Now our students have come back home, and they are studying in schools in the Sahrawi refugee camps, or have gone to other countries who provide scholarships.
Kamal, I believe Zia has a question for you.
Yes, so Kamal, so all the changes that are happening in North Africa now, in fact, all of the region, is really putting us in a unique territory. And it looks like when the Moroccan government is saying that actually autonomy might be a solution, and actually because of the current stresses the government themselves faces in Morocco, they're afraid to create instability, which means the international community is slowly buying into that discussion that actually Moroccan government's offer for autonomy might be actually the future.
Well, what we believe is that the only democratic and just and fair solution of for Western Sahara is through a referendum of self-determination. That is what has been presented by the United Nations, and in fact Morocco agreed to it in the 1989, signed, and again in 1997 under the auspices of James Baker. Morocco has no right to offer autonomy to Western Sahara because no country or international organization recognize Morocco's occupation, illegal occupation or sovereignty over the territory, while there are 84 countries worldwide that recognize the Sahrawi Republic as a sovereign state, and the Sahrawi Republic is a full-fledged member of the African Union. So we believe as a gesture of goodwill and cooperation with the United Nations and with the international community, we have accepted that the autonomy option could be put on the table, but also the Sahrawi offer for settlement has to be also considered. And that is the position of the United Nations and the Security Council.
Kamal, we want to get in one more question before we let you go from our online audience.
Yeah, Sumaya Shikran on Facebook is saying that she feels we have to give the Western Sahara back to its people. And she's asking, what influence would you say the Arab Spring has had on this conflict? What would be the biggest influence, to the point he was making?
Well, I think some commentators, including Noam Chomsky, have stated that the Arab Spring, in fact, started in Western Sahara last year in October, when 20,000 people moved out of towns and cities in Western Sahara and set up a camp near the capital called Gdaymizik, which was invaded on the 8th of November by the Moroccan army and dismantled, and people were tortured, and in some cases there were fatalities. I think, and I go back again to the United Nations, General Secretary of the United Nations, who said in his last report on Western Sahara that if anything the Arab Spring tells us is that the aspirations and the will of people have to be respected, and that the question of Western Sahara has to be decided through the free expression by its people who have a right to decide their own future, which would create an atmosphere of stability and harmony and cooperation, not only between the Sahrawis and the Moroccans, but in the entire region.
Kamal, thank you for elucidating this for us. It's a story that doesn't get reported enough. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Now, you can read more about Western Sahara on our website, stream.aljazeera.com, where you'll find videos, tweets, and other multimedia elements right there.
The hashtag #SupportYemen is one of several being used on Twitter to draw attention to violence occurring after Yemen's special security forces opened fire on protesters, killing about 50 people since Sunday. Now, for 7 months, demonstrators have been gathering across Yemen to call for an end to President Ali Abdullah Saleh's 33-year rule. Now, this video right here is one video that we're going to share with you. While much of the footage that's come out in recent days from Yemen is extremely graphic and violent, we want to share this video right here. I'm just having a little trouble playing it. This was uploaded to YouTube by Bassem Taiz and is uploaded on Monday from the city of Taiz, showing what is being called a million-man march against the killings on Sunday. Now, Yemen's Deputy Information Minister rejected accusations that the government had planned the attacks on protesters and accused, quote, unknown assailants for the violence. But medics across Yemen have accused Saleh's forces of preventing ambulances from helping the wounded. Now, there are even reports that hospitals in Sana'a have come under attack. So in this YouTube video, there's one Yemeni doctor, or a medic rather, is pleading for international support. Let's play this for you.
Can you say it again?
We want the international committee. We want the European Union. We want the UN agencies and UN headquarters to come and interfere. The Yemeni people, they are dying. Really,
so if you couldn't hear him, he was saying that people are dying and he's calling out to the international community to do something about it. And you could make out in the back of the shot people being treated on the spot right there. Now, many netizens have also taken to Twitter and Facebook to criticize Saudi Arabia after reports from the Yemen Post emerged that Saudi Arabia sent tanks to quell the protests as the political dialogue seemed to fail. Now, this is one of them from Hiba Farouk. She says, Arabs everywhere are asking the GCC to take its hands off of Yemen after the massacre committed against the protesters yesterday in Sana'a. Now, cartoonist Carlos Latouf, who has documented much of the Arab uprisings in his cartoons, created this drawing right here that shows Saleh sitting in the Saudi emir's lap while he controls tanks that are labeled, marked with the Saudi flag right there. Now, the cartoon has a QR code in the top left right here, which is a link essentially to another article about Saudi Arabia sending tanks to Yemen. So an interesting use of QR codes right there. Now, on Wednesday, we're going to be looking further into the story, into the unfolding story in Yemen, including the GCC's attempts to bring an end to the protests. So if you're in Yemen, or if you simply want to make your voice heard, send us your views, whether it's videos or photos, as always, using the hashtag AJStream.
What must be done to end violence between Turkey and the Kurdistan Workers' Party, otherwise known as the PKK? In response to recent PKK attacks, Turkey has resumed military airstrikes on suspected Kurdish separatist sites along the northern border of Iraq. And last week, the Turkish Interior Minister said ground attacks could be launched, quote, at any time. But are there other options besides military force? Online, people sympathetic to Kurds have been criticizing Turkey's renewed attacks. Let's take a look at some of the tweets that have come across our radar. This one here from @JohnEAustin says, Erdogan recognizes rights of Palestinians. Pity he doesn't respect rights of Kurds in his own country. We also see here from @ImmortalKurd, Erdogan blames Israel for war on Palestinians, but he buys Israeli weapons to kill Kurds. Joining us now via Skype to discuss this further is Kani Zulam. He's the director of the American Kurdish Information Network in Washington, D.C. Kani, welcome to the stream.
Thank you for having me.
Now, tell us a little bit, what do you think about the role of Turkish military operations in ending the violence with the PKK? Are they effective?
They are not, and they haven't been since 1984. Pursuing PKK is like looking for a needle in a haystack. The problem is not the PKK. The problem is the government of Turkey's policies towards the Kurds. PKK is simply a symptom of it.
Now, to get your thoughts on this, Zia, how would you respond?
Well, I think I agree with half of it. I mean, I clearly agree with the fact that a military response to an ongoing problem of some more than 80 years, actually, is not a solution in any shape or form. So even if Turkey was to launch the most effective military campaign against PKK camps in northern Iraq, the problems will still continue. And I think, and the root of the cause has been the treatment and the place of Kurds in the Turkish Republic. However, if you look at it from the perspective of the Turkish state, it also has a mandate to protect its own citizens. With the end of the ceasefire from PKK over the summer, we had a serious amount of Turkish troops and civilians being killed, which meant that the Turkish public itself is demanding a tougher response, which means that in a democracy, an elected government has to act upon it and protect its citizens.
Well, go ahead.
The Turkish public needs to know the Kurdish plight. It doesn't. The problem is the Kurdish language is banned, the Kurdish culture is banned. We have a government that pursues linguistic genocide, forces the Kurds, takes the Kurds from one end and wants them to become Turks on the other end through the education system that's forced on the Kurdish children for the last 88 years. And that policy has created the reaction. The reaction has been violent, has been armed, has been nonviolent. But in Turkey, unfortunately, there's no room for nonviolent resistance.
Well, I disagree at that point, actually.
I think it was John F. Kennedy who once said, when you make the nonviolent revolution impossible, you make the violent revolution inevitable.
Well, if this was 15 years ago, I would completely agree to say, well, maybe if you were a Kurd in Turkey and you were hurt and you were suffering, the only option you had was a militant reaction. But I think empirically speaking and legally speaking, Kurdish is not banned anymore. You do have Kurdish language schools, you do have Kurdish media, you do have Kurdish music. The current government has changed.
From you,
well,
sir.
I mean, you can buy them in the bookshops now. I have so many Kurdish music CDs.
You see, Article 3 of the Turkish Constitution hasn't changed. It says the language of the country is Turkish, and there can be no changes made to this article. Article 66 says people born inside the borders of Turkey are Turks by definition. They cannot be anything else. We want our space. We want to be Kurds. We don't want to be Turks. And the government of Turkey simply doesn't know what to do with us.
Sure, and I think you are right in raising the problems in the constitution, but in practice, AKP government has changed enough legislation to enable the free use of Kurdish. So we have to give credit to the government when it also achieves something good.
Zia, if we can talk...
No, again...
Just
one... no, let him finish. Go ahead.
Sure,
no. The Erdogan, for example, broke the law in allowing Kurdish television on January 1st, 2009. Why? Because it's against the law to have Kurdish programs. He wants to trust, he doesn't trust the Kurds with the Kurdish language. He wants to have Kurds who agree with him to have a Kurdish television station. The real Kurdish television station is in Europe. Many Kurds watch that, follow that. If Turkey is true democracy, they would say, okay, well, have your own, we trust you with your own language, have your own program. Another thing, the Tarat Shesh starts with the Turkish national anthem. We have our own national anthem. Why do we have to listen to the Turkish national anthem?
So let me interrupt you there, Kenny, and actually come back to you, Zia, for a moment, because there's a disagreement then about perhaps the linguistic rights. He's saying that this is a big source of problems. You're saying that the rights have been open. But, you know, if what he's saying, if you disagree with it, why do you think that there's still such a strong sentiment amongst Kurds that they've been marginalized?
Well, I think the fact that they've been marginalized is true. So nobody can deny that. The fact that Kurdish language has been banned, it's true. The fact that for the last 8 years, various Turkish governments have tried policies of assimilation, whether through education, through relocation.
And they're continuing,
and
sir.
they are true. And I think some of them, I think I agree, there's a lot of leftovers of these problems which we have to compete. And the possibility of a new Turkish constitution hopefully will give us a chance to finally change some of these things. Yet at the same time, as I confirm all of this, I cannot also deny the fact that last 5 years, till very recently, we have seen significant developments. Even you have mentioned that the Prime Minister himself took enough political risk to do something which might be unconstitutional.
He does not mean
Kurdish
it.
Language.
Tarat Shesh, for example, if you listen to it, it's heavily Turkish. It's simply stated in Kurdish. We don't want the Turkish language to be shoved through our throats. I mean, this is a very simple question. We don't want to be Turks. We want to remain Kurds.
But Kani, if you take that position, I'm sorry, Kani, let me just interrupt you. If you take that position, then is there any form of resolution with the Turkish state?
There is, yes, sir. The problem is we have to have a tolerance of the Kurds. For example, the struggle of the government of Turkey is for the supremacy of the Turks over the Kurds. The struggle of the Kurds with the Turks is to be equal to the Turks. And there's a distinction between these two, supremacy versus equality. And people of goodwill need to support the people of the Kurds so that the Kurds and the Turks are equal, so that their language is equal, so that their kids go to get the same benefits from the government that they choose to send to the parliament.
Kani, we're running out of time. We have a lot of comments coming in online. I want to get at least one online comment, then we're going to take this to the web part of the program.
So in terms of sourcing this problem or where it stems from, Jimo Zangana on Twitter saying, Ataturk secularized Turkey and in doing so created generations of ultra-nationalists with no religious morals. Now, just one thing I want to put to you, Zia, very quickly that also came in. It says Turkey has alone accounted for 1/3 of all, quote, terrorist convictions worldwide in the past 10 years. So do you think the Turkish government is dealing with this properly?
Okay, so actually on that point, we're going to have to take that answer onto our online component. Kani, thank you. Zia, thank you for being with us as well. Thank you for joining us in the stream. Before we continue this discussion online, I'm happy to say that my colleague Imran Garda is officially joining the stream team. He'll be sharing hosting duties with me and will be in this chair tomorrow as I'll be in New York with a special report. Remember, we're going to get back into these issues of Turkey and its relationship with its Kurdish community online. We will see you at stream.aljazeera.com. Join the conversation using the hashtag AJStream. We will see you online. Hi, welcome to the Post Show. We're going to continue this conversation about what's happening in Turkey and the relationship between the government and the Kurdish community there. Ahmed just posed a very interesting question to Zia. Please, go ahead.
I mean, the reason, to be honest, that we're posing this question is because a lot of the online community is saying in the past couple of months there have been thousands of politicians that have been imprisoned on terrorism-related charges. So this tweet saying Turkey has alone accounted for 1/3 of all terrorist convictions worldwide in the past 10 years. I mean, is this sustainable, this sort of way of dealing with the situation?
It is not, and that's where the problems begin. And I think a lot of people that have been arrested, which is more than 3,000 for the last year or less than that, has been either younger kids who were in protests, or there have been politicians who were genuinely using their democratic rights to form political groups and parties. And I think that's where the paradox in the Turkish state's handling of this emerges.
Right.
On one hand, you see that the Turkish government, the current government, is acutely aware that what has happened last 30 years to solve this issue has not worked. And in the recently leaked negotiation tapes between Turkish intelligence agency and PKK has showed a great resolve from the government to say, we hear your concerns and what can we do? But what we realize now is that the trust is so broken that people's motivations are doubted. And what I see from both sides is fear and anxiety, and nobody pretty much wants to be the one that does the compromise. If we talk about a solution at this stage, first of all, both the military actions by the Turkish state as well as militant insurgencies actions, PKK's, has to be stopped. And I do clearly agree with the fact that a lot of the Kurdish politicians who are arrested at this stage has to be released from prison. However, the Kurdish politicians who are not also protesting to join the Turkish parliament. And if they are not there, when the new constitution is about to be written, a lot of these things which have been raised here will not be addressed because the Kurds will not be present in mainstream politics.
Kani, how would you respond?
Yeah, I would respond by saying it was John Stuart Mill who said, there is no tyranny worse than the tyranny of majority over minority. Turkish parliament has 550 members. Kurdish parliamentarians, there are 36 Kurdish parliamentarians who were elected in the last election. 60 of them are still in jail, and then you have 30. So you have 520 Turks and 30 Kurdish parliamentarians. You're not going to have a healthy constitution. This matter goes beyond the issue of numbers.
But is that reflective? I'm just curious. Is that reflective of the demographic breakdown in the country?
No. For example, in Diyarbakir, my home city, over 650,000 people voted. 420,000 of them voted for the BDP members, and they got 6 members. 207,000 voted for AKP, and they got 5. But then one of them, Hatip Dijla, was told he could not be released from jail. So 6 deputies with 200,000 votes went to AKP. 400,000 votes elected 5 Kurdish deputies. So you have all kinds of rules stacked against the Kurds. The Kurds have to meet this criteria, and then this criteria, and then this criteria. You have legal hurdles. You have, a constitution that's against you, the legal system that's against you. It's just impossible for the Kurds to have the Turks hear them. For example, Turkish politicians, Turkish academicians, for example, these days are apologizing to the Armenians. It was the Romans who used to say, dead man cannot bite. If I were a Turkish academician, I would apologize to the Kurds. I would say, I'm ashamed of my government for banning your language, for committing linguistic genocide.
But that's where I differ from you. And I think this polarization that Kurds and then Turks don't hear Kurds, or Turks are not worried, or Turkish academics are not. In fact, I know enough number of Turkish intellectuals who would have said exactly what you just said. And where I am seeing the failure here, not really what has happened thus far, but how you and I can take this forward. So the fact that most Turks cannot... You and I can take this forward
by addressing it heads on. For example, I will ask you this question. Have you ever been to Kurdistan?
Well, yes, I have been. So I have been all throughout Turkey, and I have been various parts of the Kurdish communities in the Middle East. I know a lot of Kurds.
Can you compare the two for me? For example, if you go to the Diyarbakir, if you go to Shirnak, if you go to Jazeera, and if you go to Muğla, and if you go to Manisa, there's a difference.
There is a difference. And look, there's a difference. But the problem is this. I am actually with you. I want a Turkey that includes not only Turks and Kurds and Armenians and non-Muslims. And I think there's enough number of Turks now in Turkey saying the same thing. In fact, if this issue is solved, if Kurds can be integral parts of Turkey, just like any other citizen, all of us will rocket, not only economically, but politically, but diplomatically and culturally.
Sir, for the last 10 years, PKK has declared repeated ceasefires. The government hasn't done anything.
Well,
in 2009, they said, okay, we'll have a Kurdish opening. 34 PKK members came down from the mountains. And then the Kurds who hadn't seen their sons and daughters for 10 years, for 15 years, for 20 years, celebrated that. And the bigoted Turks said, why are you celebrating? You know, you can't address this problem. The Kurdish happiness is absolutely not tolerated in Turkey.
I agree. Habur incident, I think you are right. And IKP accepted that too. The fact that actually the chance of having PKK insurgents returning Turkey was a brilliant chance. And I think it exploded all over our face. So I completely agree with that.
And do you know that, for example, right now Turkey is massing troops on the border of Iraq?
And they are, and that's what worries us.
This is part of why we're having this conversation. But tell me, Kani, specifically, our understanding is that it's the PKK that broke this latest ceasefire. Is that correct?
Yeah, but for 10 years, sir, they declared repeated ceasefires. No one took them seriously. It was the German military tactician Clausewitz who said war is the continuation of politics by other means. They are sick and tired of waiting. And then the other thing is, you know, to compare it with the African-American situation in this country, the majority whites wouldn't give the blacks their rights. It took LBJ, John F. K to use the power of the federal government to give the blacks their rights. There is no such an initiative on the part of the government of Turkey. They simply say, well, you don't have the numbers, you don't have the rights, you don't have, well, you have to just accept our crumbs.
But do you
think, are not accepting
yeah, no, you should go for it. No, I'm just trying to get our community in here. Now, Kani, I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. Prime Minister Erdogan spent 3 days in Egypt. He's done, you know, somewhat of a Mideast tour, and a lot of people welcomed him with open arms. So much so that this photo I have right here says, "Together with one hand for the future," and there's a kind of banner of Prime Minister Erdogan on top of a very famous bridge in Egypt. But he was also met with a lot of criticisms in terms of the disconnect between his policy in Palestine, you know, championing the rights of the Palestinian people, and how he and his government treats Kurds. So we have this tweet that came in today, although we've seen many other tweets. This one right here, it says, "Yes, it is. If Turkey believed Palestinians deserve their own freedom, then why not the Kurds? They're both ethnic minorities." What are your thoughts on this, and what do you think this might mean for Prime Minister Erdogan's influence in the Middle Eastern region in general?
You know, I say this with a heavy heart. Prime Minister of Turkey, Erdogan, is a hypocrite. In November 2010, he got the Gaddafi Human Rights Award, and then less than 8 months later, he now goes and takes credit for the revolution of the Arab Spring. It is just absolutely boggles the mind. And then as far as the Palestinian issue, he champions the rights of the Gazans. He says they're a Muslim people, meaning like an oppressed people. Well, he doesn't, Arabic is not banned in Gaza. Arabic is not allowed, Kurdish is not allowed to be spoken in Turkey. You know, to this day, the law that Erdogan, the TRT is not constitutional in Turkey. It doesn't trust the Kurds with their language. It just has some turncoat Kurds, and then they are now using Kurdish to assimilate the Kurds even more. And that just, you know, it's just a double standard.
You know, we've been getting so much input from one user in particular. His name is Hevalo, and he has a direct question for you, Zia, so I'll put it to you. He says, Kurds were granted the right of self-determination in the Treaty of Sèvres, and he's going back all the way to 1921. Why do they not have that right now?
Hevalo has been asking a lot of great questions to me on Twitter for the last 2-3 days, and a lot of them have been really good. But I think from a legal perspective, the Treaty of Sèvres is not legally acceptable anymore. Right. So it's not binding. The Luzon Treaty is what really created modern Republic of Turkey, and that pretty much took away the legality of that. So looking back at a treaty like that doesn't take us any further. The only legal framework now which Kurds can use and are using and should use is the European Convention on Human Rights, and I think which provides legitimately good amount of legal framework for us to address the discrimination faced by Kurds in their cultural rights as well as economic opportunities.
Great. Actually, I'm sorry, Kani, just one thing on that, but just to an earlier point, Zia, because I want to get your response on this front as well. What about this allegation that there's a fundamental discrepancy in Erdogan's policies to the Kurds vis-a-vis the Palestinians?
Well, I think it's a paradox. I don't think he's a hypocrite, and I think he's a genuine man. But any issue that is closer to home,
between paradox and
definitely. So a paradox is someone who is genuinely perhaps wants peace and stability, and at the same time, because these issues are so close to home and are so complicated, it blunders and it becomes inconsistent. Whereas hypocritical would be a lot more intense for that.
Or another explanation. Erdogan has gone to Turkish public schools. He simply hasn't been told about the Kurds. Up until 1988, you couldn't even see the word Kurd in the Turkish newspapers. So he has a hard time adjusting to this. And I think the Turkish intellectuals like Ziya need to help him and tell him that there's no difference between the Palestinians and the Kurds.
And no, I think, look, Turkish intellectuals like me have so much burden over their shoulders. First of all, because we love our country, including Kurds and Armenians, and we want the best of it. Yet at the same time, we are acutely aware of all the problems that we're addressing here. So I don't think there's actually anyone in their sane minds today in Turkey who will deny all these issues. But I think where I feel trapped personally is not really pinpointing where things are going wrong, but really pinpointing what do we do now? How can we change this? What kind of conversation do we need to have? For example, the last time I was at this show, Hamza Aktan, another Kurdish blogger and thinker, challenged me in my use of the word terror organization for PKK. And I really listened to him and I realized, look, he's really right. This is actually better addressed as an insurgency. And I got criticized by even Kurds and by Turks for changing my views. No, I am learning from you as we engage. And this notion that Turks and Kurds can rationally sit down and engage and listen, I think is what we have lacked in Turkey for so long. When I listen to Turkish friends in Western Turkey, in Izmir, Istanbul, they are worried, they're afraid. And why is it the Kurdish voices fail to reach them
Well,
directly?
let me actually and turn that question back to you, Kani. What do you believe that Kurdish intellectuals should be doing to address this?
I mean, I think a lot of us have tried to reach out, but we have not been embraced, if you will. It's like, again, the blacks struggle in this country. When Dr. Martin Luther King died, there was an autopsy made on his heart, and they thought he had the heart of a 70-year-old man because he was under so much stress. A lot of Kurdish intellectuals are under a lot of stress because they are afraid that their loved ones are going to disappear, or they themselves might be tortured. I mean, my own village was destroyed. My 2 siblings were tortured because of my activism here. Not to blow on my horn, but just to give you an example of what the Kurds are facing. And I think there's a lot of ignorance on the part of, with all due respect to Ziya, on the part of the Turks about the Kurds. They simply don't know. They would love to uphold the right of black Africans in South Africa, people in Sahara, people in Gaza. And when it comes to the Kurds, it's like a black hole. They simply don't understand it.
Well, on that note, we're going to have to let it go today. Thank you, Kani, for joining us. Thank you, Ziya, also for being with us. Wonderful job, Ahmed, getting the community involved. And thank you, our community, for viewing this. This conversation is going to continue, as always, online. Check out the Storify at stream.aljazeera.com and continue communicating with us about this using the hashtag AJStream. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you online.